He faced bombs, death threats, and the hate of a nation armed with nothing but a dream. This is the true story of how one man's voice became more powerful than any weapon. To follow this incredible journey and discover more inspiring stories that will help you master English, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss our next chapter. Today, we begin a very special journey. This is not just a history lesson. It is a journey into the heart and the life of a man who truly changed the world. His name is Martin Luther King Jr. I want to tell you this story in the most simple, the most beautiful way that I can. We are going to discover everything about him: his childhood, his parents, his home. We will explore his first thoughts, his private fears, his biggest dreams, and his deepest pain. Every small detail is important. So please sit back, find a comfortable place, and relax. Let the story take you to another time, to another place. Let's begin our journey into the early life of Martin Luther King Jr. It was a cold winter day. The date was January 15th, 1929. In a city called Atlanta, in the southern part of the United States of America, a baby boy was born. He came into the world in a small, peaceful home on a street named Auburn Avenue. This wasn't just any street. Auburn Avenue was special. It was the heart of a strong Black community, a place full of Black families, busy churches, wonderful music, and a powerful feeling of togetherness. This new baby boy was given a name, Michael King Jr. Yes, you heard that right. His first name was Michael. He was not originally called Martin. That name, the name the whole world knows, was changed a few years later by his father. But we will talk more about that very soon. The house where the baby was born was not large, but it was always warm. The family did not have a lot of money, but they had something much more valuable. They had love, they had respect, and they had a very, very strong faith in God. Martin's father was named Michael King Sr. He was a strong man, a serious man, and a deeply religious man. He was a Baptist preacher. This means he was a pastor, a man who spoke in church every Sunday. He taught people from the Bible about God, about truth, and about justice. His voice was powerful and filled the church. His mother was Alberta Williams King. She was a kind, intelligent, and very musical woman. She had a quiet strength that made everyone around her feel calm. She was a teacher, but she was also a talented pianist. Her fingers would dance on the piano keys, filling their small home with beautiful music. It was she who taught little Martin how to play the piano. And it was she who taught him how to speak gently, even when the world outside was loud and unkind. Both of his parents were deeply spiritual people. Their faith was the foundation of their home. They taught their children a very important lesson. Perhaps the most important lesson of all. They taught them not to hate, but to love. They taught them not to fight with their fists, but to fight with their minds, with their words, and with their wisdom. Now let's talk about the name change. When little Martin was about 5 years old, his father, Michael Sr., took a long trip. He traveled all the way to Germany, a country in Europe. While he was there, he learned about a great historical figure, a man named Martin Luther. This Martin Luther was a Christian reformer who lived hundreds of years ago. He was a man of great courage who stood up against the wrong teachings in the church of his time. Michael Sr. was deeply inspired by this brave man's story. When he returned home to Atlanta, he made a big decision. He decided to change both his own name and his young son's name from Michael to Martin Luther King. So, from that day on, the little boy we are talking about became known to the world as Martin Luther King Jr. Martin was a very curious child. His mind was always working, always asking questions. He always wanted to know why. He would look at the world around him and ask his parents, why are some people poor? Why do some children go to beautiful big schools while other children go to small old ones? Why can't I play with the white children who live nearby? Yes, even at a very young age, Martin noticed that the world was not a fair place. And when he was only 6 years old, something happened that was very, very painful. He had a good friend, a little white boy. They were best friends. They played together every single day. They would run through the fields, laugh, and share their secrets. But one day, everything changed. The boy's parents told him, "You cannot play with Martin anymore." Why they said it was because he was colored. Martin did not understand. What did that mean? His heart was broken. He went home, his eyes full of tears, and he cried and cried. His parents sat down with him. They held him close, and they explained as gently as they could a very difficult truth. They said, "Martin, in this country, black people and white people are not treated equally. It is wrong. It is a terrible sickness called segregation, but it is the truth of the world we live in." That moment was like a crack in his young heart. But through that crack, a light came in. It opened his eyes to the injustice of the world. Martin lived in a 2-story wooden house. It was a busy, happy home. He lived there with his grandparents, his parents, his older sister Christine, and his younger brother Alfred. They were a very close family. They did everything together. They ate their meals together every day. They prayed together every morning and every night. And they laughed together. Every evening, the family would gather around the big dinner table. His father, a man who believed in learning and growing, would look at his children and ask, "What did you learn today?" And little Martin would speak. He would talk about his day at school, about his friends, and about all the thoughts that were spinning in his head. Even as a small child, his words were strong. His voice was soft, but it had something special inside it. It had sincerity. It had truth. He loved to read. He would spend hours with books, getting lost in stories and ideas, and he loved to listen to his father preach in church on Sundays. He was fascinated by the stories from the Bible. Sometimes at home, he would stand on a small chair pretending he was in a church. He would give powerful speeches to his family, waving his hands just like his father did. He was like a little preacher practicing for a future he didn't yet understand. But Martin was not a perfect child. He was very smart, yes, but sometimes he was also stubborn. He had a strong will. If he did something wrong, his parents would discipline him. Sometimes this meant a spanking with a belt, which was a common way to discipline children at that time. But every punishment was always followed by a hug and a lesson. His parents would hold him and say, "We do this because we love you. We do this because we believe in the man you can become." This careful balance of love and discipline gave Martin a very strong sense of right and wrong. Martin's family went to Ebenezer Baptist Church every single Sunday. For them, the church was so much more than just a building. It was a second home. It was a place where people came to share their joys and their sorrows. It was a place where they cried, where they sang with all their hearts, where they hoped for a better future, and where they found the strength to face another week in a difficult world. Young Martin would sit in the pews and watch his father preach. He saw how his father's words could lift people up. He saw the crowd rise to their feet, their faces full of emotion. And he thought to himself, "One day I will speak like that. One day I will touch people's hearts too." The beautiful rhythm of the church songs, the powerful words of the Bible, the incredible energy of the people singing and praying together, all of this became a part of Martin's soul. Martin started school earlier than most children at the young age of 5. He was so intelligent that he learned very quickly. In fact, he skipped 2 grades in school, the 9th grade and the 12th grade. This meant that he was ready for college when he was just 15 years old. But even as a brilliant young student, he felt the pain of racism every day. It was a constant shadow. He could not go into certain libraries to read their books. When he rode the bus, he had to sit in the back behind a line. He saw signs on water fountains in restaurants and in front of schools that said, "Whites only." These signs were like a slap in the face. They made him feel angry, but he did not scream or shout. He watched, he thought, he listened, and he told himself quietly but firmly, "One day I will change this." As Martin grew older, the world around him became more and more difficult to ignore. The pain of segregation, of being separated and treated as less, wasn't just a sad childhood memory anymore. It followed him everywhere he went. But something inside him was also changing. He was no longer a small boy asking his mother, "Why can't I play with them?" He was now a teenager, a young man who was quietly observing, analyzing, and understanding the deep unfairness of the world he lived in. By the time he was 13 years old, he had already made a decision deep in his heart. "This is not right," he thought, "and I must do something about it." He had seen the courage of his own father. He had seen him stand up to white men in public without showing any fear, and that image was burned into his memory. He remembered one time they went shopping for shoes. They sat down in the front of the store, ready to be served. The white storekeeper came over and told them they had to move to the back of the store just because they were black. Martin watched his father. He saw him stand up tall, look the man in the eye, and say firmly, "We will either buy shoes sitting right here, or we won't buy any shoes at all." They turned around and left the store without buying anything. That single moment lit a fire in Martin's young heart. It was not a fire of hate. It was a fire of pride, of courage, and of quiet, dignified strength. At just 15 years old, an age when most boys are still worrying about high school, Martin skipped his final grades and entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. Morehouse was a very special place. It was a college only for black men at that time. It was a place where young black boys were trained and educated to become leaders. Imagine that for a moment. A 15-year-old boy walking on a college campus among men who were much older than him. In the beginning, he did not plan to become a preacher like his father. He thought about other careers. Maybe he would become a doctor to heal people's bodies, or maybe a lawyer to fight for justice in the courts. At that time, he felt that religion was sometimes too emotional and that it didn't have all the answers for the world's complex problems. But something important happened inside him while he was at Morehouse. He started reading the words of powerful thinkers and great writers. He read the Bible again, but this time he read it with new, deeper eyes. He read books by famous philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. And he read the writings of a man who would change his life forever, a man named Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi's non-violent fight for India's freedom from British rule deeply, deeply touched Martin's soul. He began to see a new possibility. He realized that words, peace, and moral strength were much stronger than fists or guns or armies. Slowly, a new desire began to grow inside him. It was a desire to serve people, to guide them, and to change the world not through law or medicine, but through powerful, peaceful words. By the end of his time at Morehouse, Martin had made up his mind. He would become a minister just like his father and his grandfather before him. But he would do it with his own voice, with his own ideas, and with his own special way of walking the path of justice. After finishing his studies at Morehouse, Martin wanted to learn even more. He went to a new school called Crozer Theological Seminary in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, this was a very different experience for him. It was the first time in his life that he truly lived and studied among white students, and it was not always easy. Most of the other students were polite, but Martin often felt a quiet wall between them, a wall of misunderstanding and distance. He was a brilliant student. He worked incredibly hard. He read everything he could find: books about the Bible, theology, philosophy, and poetry. He even started studying psychology because he wanted to understand how the human mind works, why people hate, and how they can learn to love. He was very serious about his studies, but he was not a cold person. He had a good sense of humor. He laughed, he played with friends, and he even won an award for being the most outstanding student in his entire class. But behind all of his success, he was still searching. He was trying to find his true voice, his purpose. He once wrote in his private diary, "I have a deep urge to serve humanity." This was not a boy just playing at being a preacher. This was a young man searching for the best way to heal a broken and divided world. He didn't want to just preach comforting words in a church on Sunday. He wanted to touch people's souls. He wanted to stop wars. He wanted to stop racism. He wanted to stop poverty. He was looking for the right tools to do that incredible work. It was also during this time that Martin began to experience a deep sense of loneliness. He was far away from his warm and loving home. He was surrounded by people who could never truly understand the daily pain and humiliation of being a black person in America. He often felt very much alone. He would write long letters to his mother and father, telling them how much he missed them and how much he loved them. But even in his loneliness, there was always hope in his heart. He knew he felt that something fierce was waiting for him in the future. During his time in seminary, Martin also learned how to speak with a calm and centered power. He practiced his speeches over and over again. He would read them out loud in his room, testing different tones, different rhythms. He was carefully creating a voice that was firm, but gentle, strong, but peaceful. His dream was not to become famous. His dream was to be useful. He wanted to become a bridge between pain and peace. After he finished at Crozer, Martin wanted to go even higher in his education. So he moved to the city of Boston to study for his PhD in theology at Boston University. Boston was a big city, very different from the South where he grew up. The racism there was not as loud and open, but it was still there, hidden in small, quiet ways. And in Boston, something very special and wonderful happened. He met the woman who would change his life forever. Her name was Coretta Scott. She was a young, beautiful, and highly educated woman. She was studying music at the famous New England Conservatory. She was smart. She was confident, she was talented, and she was full of grace and dignity. Martin was immediately drawn to her. It wasn't just because of her beauty. It was because of her mind and her heart. She cared deeply about civil rights. She believed in peace, in justice, and in human dignity, just like Martin did. Their first meeting was arranged by a mutual friend. After talking with her for just a short time, Martin knew she was special. He later told his friend, "She is not only attractive, but she has character." They started dating. They would take long walks through the parks in Boston, talking for hours about books, about music, about politics, and about their dreams for the future. Martin would often call her on the telephone and read poetry to her. He said that being with her made him feel like he was home. They got married in 1953, back in her home state of Alabama. It was a small, beautiful ceremony in her family's garden, and Martin's own father performed the service. Coretta would later become his partner in every struggle, his supporter at every speech, and his companion on every difficult march. She was not just his wife. She was his equal, his strength, and his silent warrior. While he was working hard on his PhD, Martin also worked at local churches. He gave sermons on Sundays and helped people in the community who were in need. He believed that faith was not just about praying, it was about acting. It was about doing. He often told people, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." He finished his PhD in 1955, officially becoming Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And soon after that, he accepted a position as the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. It was a small church, but his voice was growing bigger and stronger. He was only 26 years old, but when he stood in the pulpit and began to speak, people felt something powerful. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He spoke with a beautiful rhythm, with deep honesty, and with a burning passion. People in the congregation began to whisper to each other, "There is something different about this new pastor. He is going to lead us somewhere new." And then, something happened in that very city of Montgomery. Something that would change Martin's life and the entire world forever. One ordinary day, a quiet, dignified black woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white man on a segregated city bus. She was tired of being treated like she was less than human. For this small, brave act, she was arrested by the police. That small act of courage became a spark. It lit a fire. Black leaders all across Montgomery came together. They said, "We must fight this injustice. We have had enough. We need a leader, someone young, educated, calm, and brave." They chose Martin. It was not something he had planned. He had only just arrived in the city. But destiny was calling his name. And Martin, with his heart full of both fear and faith, said yes. From that single moment, Martin's journey as a great civil rights leader truly began. But he was not yet ready for the terrible storms that would come. He had no idea that soon people would threaten to kill him, threaten his family, and try to destroy everything he loved. But still, he stood strong. Because he believed deep in his soul that nonviolence, love, and truth were stronger than fear, stronger than bullets, and stronger than hate. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't ask for fame. He never chased attention. But sometimes history does not wait for people to feel ready. It chooses them. And when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on that bus in December 1955, history knocked loudly on Martin's door. At just 26 years old, he stood in front of a huge crowd in a packed church. It was filled with black men and women. Many of them were scared. Many were angry. And all of them were tired. They were so tired of being humiliated every single day, tired of being forced to sit at the back of the bus, tired of drinking from separate dirty water fountains, tired of using separate bathrooms, tired of being treated like second-class citizens in their own country. They did not want violence. They wanted dignity. They wanted to be heard. And Martin, looking calm, confident, young, but wise, stood up and spoke words that would echo through time. He said, "If we are wrong, then justice is a lie. If we are wrong, then the Constitution of the United States is a fake. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong." The people in that church didn't just listen. They stood up on their feet. They clapped. They cried tears of hope. They nodded their heads. In that one moment, a leader was truly born. A leader who did not carry weapons. A leader who carried truth in his voice and love in his heart. The Montgomery Bus Boycott began the very next day. For 381 days, yes, for more than a full year, the black citizens of Montgomery refused to ride the city buses. Think about that for a moment. Imagine walking to your job, to school, to the church every single day. Walking through cold winter mornings, through rainy days, and through hot, humid afternoons. Imagine mothers walking for miles with heavy bags of groceries in their arms. Imagine grandmothers with sore knees and aching backs still refusing to sit on those buses. Imagine fathers coming home from a long 12-hour shift of hard work, and then walking 2 more miles just so they could say, "I did not ride the bus today." That is how serious they were. They were not just walking. They were making a powerful statement. They were saying, "We will no longer accept being treated like we are less." And behind all of this, guiding them, planning, and inspiring them, was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But leading this powerful movement was not easy. It came with a very heavy price. Just a few weeks into the boycott, Martin received a phone call late at night. An angry, hateful man's voice said, "If you are not out of this town in 3 days, we are going to blow your brains out and blow up your house." Martin put down the phone. His hands were shaking. His wife Coretta was asleep in the next room, and their new baby daughter was sleeping peacefully in her crib. He walked slowly into the kitchen. He sat down at the table, put his head in his hands, and he whispered a prayer. "Lord," he said, "I'm scared. I'm losing my courage. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left." And then, in the deep silence of that dark kitchen, he felt something. A presence. A quiet, steady voice in his heart that said to him, "Stand up for truth. Stand up for justice. I will be with you." From that night on, Martin was no longer afraid. He knew that he might die for this cause, but he was ready. Because he knew he was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting for his people, for his child, and for every child. But the threats did not stop. One evening, while Martin was at a meeting, someone threw a bomb into his house. The blast shook the walls, shattered all the windows, and sent thick black smoke rising into the night sky. Coretta and their baby were inside. Miraculously, they both survived without serious injury. When Martin rushed home and saw the angry crowd gathering outside, he saw the police everywhere. His heart dropped. But then he saw Coretta standing strong, holding their baby safely in her arms. Tears of relief filled his eyes. The people in the crowd were angry. They were ready to fight back. Some of them had even brought guns. But Martin stood on the broken porch of his bombed house and raised his hand for quiet. He said, "We must meet hate with love. We must meet violence with nonviolence." And because of the power of his words, the people listened. They put down their weapons. Their leader had reminded them that peace is a form of power. The boycott continued day after difficult day. Martin gave speeches. He organized carpools for people who had to travel far. He answered threats and he held his community together. He was arrested by the police. He was ordered to pay fines. He was called terrible names in the newspapers. But he never, ever gave up. He walked when others walked. He prayed when others lost hope. Finally, after more than a year of walking of suffering and of standing strong together, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that segregation on public buses was illegal. It was a victory. The people cheered. They danced in the streets. They hugged each other. But Martin did not just celebrate. He warned them, "This is not the end. This is just the beginning." And he was right. After the success in Montgomery, Martin became a national figure. But with this new fame came even greater danger. His every move was watched. The FBI, the nation's top police agency, under a man named J. Edgar Hoover, began spying on him. They listened to his phone calls. They followed him around. They even tried to break up his marriage by sending him threatening letters. But Martin refused to be broken. He kept moving forward. He traveled all across America, preaching his message of love, justice, and nonviolence. He met with presidents in the White House. He sat in cold jail cells. He led marches through hostile streets. He hugged mothers whose sons had been killed by hate. He spoke to crowds of thousands, always reminding them, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. By the early 1960s, Martin had become the face and the voice of the civil rights movement. He helped create an organization called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC. This organization trained young people to fight for their rights with peace, not with fists. He led important campaigns in cities like Albany, Birmingham, and Selma. Each time he faced police dogs, powerful fire hoses, police batons, and more jail time. And still he smiled. Still he walked. Still he spoke. One of the most powerful and painful moments came in Birmingham, Alabama. He and a group of young black children decided to march peacefully through the city. The police chief, a man named Bull Connor, turned high-pressure water cannons and angry police dogs on them. The images of children being attacked shocked the entire world. How could anyone do this to children? Martin knew this pain was necessary to open the eyes of the nation. And it worked. The world began to listen. People in other countries started to support the movement. The pressure for change was growing. Then came the moment that would define him forever. August 28, 1963. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Over 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C. They were black and white, young and old, standing together, hand in hand, waiting to hear Martin speak. The sun was hot that day. The air was heavy with anticipation. But when he stepped up to the microphone, something magical happened. His voice was calm at first. He talked about injustice. He talked about the broken promises of America. But then someone behind him, a famous gospel singer named Mahalia Jackson, shouted out, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." And he did. He put away his written speech and spoke from his heart. He spoke words that shook the very soul of a nation. "I have a dream," he thundered, "that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. Free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last." The crowd exploded in cheers. People cried openly. Strangers hugged each other. That speech was not just words. It was hope in human form. It was not just about race. It was about freedom, dignity, and unity for all people. But after the dream came the hard reality. There was more jail time, more threats, and more struggle. In 1964, Martin won the Nobel Peace Prize. He was the youngest man ever to receive it at that time. But instead of relaxing or celebrating, he used all the prize money to support the movement. He started to speak out not just about racism, but also about poverty and the war in Vietnam. He said, "What good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a burger?" He began to fight for all poor people. Black, white, Native American, Hispanic, all people who were suffering under the weight of inequality. By now, the entire world knew who he was. But with this great recognition came even greater pressure, danger, and responsibility. His face was on television screens everywhere. His words were printed in newspapers around the globe. His name was being written into the pages of history. Yet he was still just a man, a husband, a father, a dreamer. At home, his family life continued to be filled with deep love, but also with constant fear. His wife, Coretta Scott King, often stayed awake late at night, listening for any unusual sounds, terrified of another bomb, another attack. Their 4 children, Yolanda Martin III. Dexter and Bernice were growing up in a world where their father was both a hero to millions and a target for hate. Every single time he left the house, there was no guarantee that he would return. But Martin, even with this constant fear hanging over him, remained calm on the outside. He had trained his mind to stay focused, to keep going no matter what. During this time, Dr. King expanded his fight for justice beyond the southern states. He began to address the problem of housing discrimination in the North. In 1966, he moved his family into a rundown apartment in a poor neighborhood in Chicago. He wanted to show the world the terrible living conditions that many Black families were forced to endure. The apartment was cold. The windows were broken, and rats sometimes ran across the floor. King lived there on purpose to understand their pain, to feel their struggle, and to wake up the conscience of the nation. He marched through the streets of Chicago, where he was met by angry white crowds. They screamed hateful words at him. People threw bricks and rocks. One of those bricks hit him hard in the head. He bled. He staggered for a moment, but he did not stop. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and kept marching. When a reporter asked him how he could possibly face so much hate, he simply replied, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." But as Dr. King continued his work, not everyone agreed with his methods anymore. Some of the younger civil rights activists felt that his nonviolent approach was too slow. They were impatient. They believed in fighting back with force. They called for Black power and revolution, not for patience. King understood and respected their frustration, but he never ever changed his firm belief in nonviolence. He often said, "Returning hate for hate multiplies hate. Only love can drive out hate." In 1967, King took a very bold and controversial step that surprised many of his supporters. He began to speak out strongly against the Vietnam War. While many other leaders avoided the topic, King stood at the historic Riverside Church in New York City and delivered a powerful speech called Beyond Vietnam. In it, he called America the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. That single line caused a political storm. Newspapers that had once praised him now criticized him. Donations to his organization slowed down. Even President Lyndon B. Johnson, who had signed the Civil Rights Act, became angry with him. But King did not back down. He said, "A time comes when silence is betrayal." In that same year, King launched what he called the Poor People's Campaign. He realized that racial equality was only one part of the problem. He believed that poverty was another kind of slavery, and it was a slavery that did not care about skin color. Black, white, Hispanic, Native American, millions of people of all races were suffering. So, King planned another huge march on Washington. This time, not just for civil rights, but for economic justice. He wanted to bring thousands of poor people from all over the country to the nation's capital. They would camp there peacefully until the government took real action to end poverty. But before that could happen, something urgent pulled him to Memphis, Tennessee. In March of 1968, a group of Black sanitation workers in the city went on strike. They were treated unfairly. They were paid very low wages, and they were forced to work in dangerous, terrible conditions. Two of their fellow workers, Ecole Cole and Robert Walker, had recently been crushed to death by a broken garbage truck. Their tragic deaths sparked outrage. The workers began to march carrying simple but powerful signs that read, "I am a man." They were demanding respect, safety, and fair pay. King knew he had to stand with them, so he flew to Memphis to lend his support. But the tensions in the city were very high. A previous march had turned violent when some young protesters, frustrated and angry, started breaking windows. King was heartbroken. He knew that if his movement for nonviolence was going to succeed, it had to remain peaceful always. So he decided to return to Memphis a few days later, determined to lead a completely nonviolent march. On the evening of April 3, 1968, Dr. King delivered what would become his final prophetic speech. He stood at the Mason Temple Church in front of a packed, cheering audience. Outside, a terrible storm was raging. Thunder roared and heavy rain beat down on the roof. But inside, King's voice thundered even louder. He spoke with a fire and a passion that seemed to come from another world, as if he knew his time on earth was coming to an end. He said, "We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop." His voice grew stronger, "And I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." People in the crowd cried. They cheered. Some said they felt chills run down their spines. It was more than just a speech. It felt like a prophecy. The next day, April the 4th, 1968, was calm at first. King was staying in the Lorraine Motel in room 306. That evening, just after 6 p.m., he stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air before heading to dinner. He was laughing and talking with his friends who were standing in the parking lot below. Then, at 6:01 p.m., a single gunshot tore through the quiet evening air. The bullet struck him in the face, cutting through his jaw and his spine. He fell backward onto the balcony floor. Blood poured from his wound. People screamed. Chaos erupted. His friends ran to him shouting his name, praying, crying. He was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital, but the damage was too great. At 7:05 p.m., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was pronounced dead. He was just 39 years old. News of his death spread across the world like a wildfire. Within hours, cities across the nation exploded in riots. Fires burned. People screamed in grief and in anger. In homes all across America and beyond, millions of people sat in stunned silence watching the news on their televisions, feeling as if the sun itself had gone dark. The news moved fast on radios, on black and white TVs, and in every newspaper. In homes, churches, schools, and on the streets, people cried. Some just sat in silence, unable to speak. Others fell to their knees in prayer. Some were filled with rage. Many people felt completely lost. But in the middle of all this pain, something powerful happened. Something that King himself had always believed in. You may kill the dreamer, but you cannot kill the dream. And that is exactly what happened. In more than 100 cities across America, people poured into the streets. Some marched peacefully, holding candles and pictures of Dr. King. Others, full of pain and anger, began to protest violently. Buildings burned. Glass shattered on the streets. Sirens wailed through the night. Washington, D.C., Chicago, Baltimore all turned into battlegrounds of grief. People kept asking, why him? Why now? But through that terrible fire, something else was burning too, a new urgent call for change. Dr. King had spent his entire life shaking the conscience of America, and now in his death he had shaken it to its very core. Just 1 week later, on April 11, 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It is also known as the Fair Housing Act. This important law made it illegal to refuse to rent or sell homes to people because of their race, their religion, or their national background. This was something King had been fighting for so hard in Chicago. He did not live to see it become law, but his tragic death made it happen. On April 9, 1968, Dr. King's funeral was held in his hometown of Atlanta. Thousands and thousands of people came, not just famous leaders, but ordinary people. Farmers, mothers, janitors, students, teachers, soldiers. They all walked, many of them in tears, behind the simple wooden wagon that carried his coffin. It was not a fancy golden car. It was not expensive. It was a humble wagon pulled by 2 mules, just as King would have wanted. Simple and close to the people. Inside churches around the country and across the world, one of his favorite songs played "Precious Lord, Take My Hand." And as that song played, many people closed their eyes and whispered his famous words, "Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last." Dr. King had planted seeds, not in the ground, but in the minds and hearts of millions of people. And after he was gone, those seeds began to grow. His children took up the torch. His wife, Coretta Scott King, did not stop working. She became a powerful voice for peace, for justice, and for women's rights. She opened the King Center in Atlanta, a place dedicated to keeping her husband's vision of a peaceful world alive. Their children, Yolanda Martin III, Dexter and Bernice, also carried his message forward in their own different ways. They became speakers, activists, and leaders, always reminding the world of who their father was. For years, people demanded that there should be a national holiday in King's name. Some politicians said no. Others fought hard for it. But finally, in 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill creating Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a national holiday to honor his life and his work. The first official holiday was celebrated in 1986. Today, every year, on the 3rd Monday of January, people all across America and in some countries around the world take that day to remember his powerful message of love, justice, and unity. His name is now everywhere. More than 900 streets in America are named after Dr. King. Thousands of schools, libraries, and public buildings carry his name. In 2011, a giant stone memorial was built in his honor in Washington, D.C. It is not far from the Lincoln Memorial, where he gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. His face is carved into a massive rock, standing tall like a mountain. Solid and unshakable. Before King, it was normal and legal for Black Americans to be treated unfairly. They often could not vote freely, they could not live where they wanted, or attend certain schools. Many lived in constant fear. Because of King's work, Black Americans won the legal right to vote freely. Segregation in schools and public places was outlawed. Millions of people of all races began to believe in the true meaning of equality. His ideas even crossed the oceans. In places like South Africa, India, and even in Europe, people followed his nonviolent methods to fight against their own injustices. More than 50 years have passed since his death, but Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice still lives. Every time someone chooses peace over violence, every time someone stands up for the weak and the powerless, every time someone says, "I have a dream." Dr. King's spirit is alive. Why does his story still matter so much today? Many young people today never saw King on television. They never heard him speak live. Yet his words still have the power to move our hearts. Why? Because King was more than just a leader. He was like a mirror showing us the best version of what we could become if we choose love over hate. He believed in a world where people are judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He taught us that love is stronger than fear, and that one single voice can change a nation. He didn't carry a sword. He carried hope. And hope is the most powerful weapon of all. Martin Luther King Jr. was not just a speaker. He was also a talented writer. He wrote several books to share his ideas, his dreams, and his details of the fight for justice. His words gave people hope and strength. One of his most famous books is called Why We Can't Wait, where he explained why the fight for civil rights could not be delayed any longer. He also wrote Stride Toward Freedom, which tells the inspiring story of the Montgomery Bus Boycott. His books are full of truth, courage, and love. Even today, people read them to learn how to stand up for what is right. His words still teach the world how to fight hate with peace and how to dream big, no matter how hard life gets. So what can we learn from his incredible life? Dr. King once said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" That is the question that we must still ask ourselves today. So let us not just remember Dr. King. Let us try to become what he believed in. Be kind. Be brave. Stand up when it is easier to stay silent. Speak peace when the world around you screams with anger. And always, always keep dreaming. Martin Luther King Jr. did not live a long life, but he lived a great one. He did not have a lot of money or political power or an army. He had something much stronger. He had a voice that was full of truth, a heart that was full of love, and a dream that was big enough to change the world. He taught us that you do not have to be perfect to make a difference. You do not need to shout in anger. You do not need to fight with your fists. You just need courage, kindness, and belief. The lessons from his life are simple and powerful. 1. Stand up even if you are alone. King stood up against racism and injustice when many people told him to stay silent. The lesson is, if you see something that is wrong, do not be silent. Even one voice can shake the world. 2. Fight with peace, not with hate. While others chose violence, King always chose peace. He believed in nonviolence even when people hurt him. The lesson is, love is stronger than hate. Peace is stronger than fear. 3. Keep going even when it is hard. He was threatened. He was put in jail. He was attacked. But he kept walking. He kept marching. He kept dreaming. The lesson is, when life is hard, do not give up. Keep going. The path to real change is never easy, but it is always worth it. 4. Dream big, bigger than yourself. His dream was not just for him. It was for every child, every man, every woman. It was for the whole world. The lesson is, have dreams not just for yourself, but for others too. Be a light for people who are in darkness. And 5. Leave the world a better place than you found it. He did not live to see all the change he wanted, but because of him, millions of people now live with more freedom and more dignity. The lesson is, your life matters. Even after you are gone, your good words and your kind actions can keep helping others. If Dr. King could speak to you today, I think he would say, you matter. You are powerful. You have a voice. You can dream. You can rise. You can help others. You can bring light to the darkest places. So do not wait. Do not doubt yourself. Do not be afraid. The world needs your voice. The world needs your heart. Be the reason someone else believes in peace, in love, and in hope again. He said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Dr. King's story is not just a story of the past. It is a mirror. It asks you, what kind of person will you be? Will you stay quiet, or will you speak up? Will you close your eyes to injustice, or will you open your heart? Will you choose to hate, or will you choose to love? The dream is now in your hands, so dream big, live bravely, love deeply, and be the change just like Martin Luther King Jr. Because one day, someone will tell your story, and let it be a story of hope, of kindness, and of courage. The story of a person who did not give up, who chose love, and who helped to change the world for the better. Let that person be you. This is the end of Martin Luther King Jr.'s story, but it is also the beginning. The beginning of your story. My story. Our story. Because every time we choose justice, every time we choose love, we are continuing his dream. He may have left this world at the age of 39, but in truth, Dr. King never died. He became a voice that echoes forever in the hearts of those who dare to dream. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and for easy English practice. I will see you next time with another story. Keep learning and keep growing.